I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. So, we've just had Jehoiakim taken captive into Babylon. Jehoiakim has died, and shortly after, Jehoiakim is taken into captivity into Babylon, and Zedekiah is made king. Let us pick this up in 2 Kings, chapter 24 still. We're going to read 17 through 20. This will finish out the chapter. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, his father's brother, king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For through the anger of the Lord it came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, until he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. So remember, Jeremiah has already told these people, follow the king of Babylon, serve him. Submit yourself to the rule of Babylon and everything will be well. Zedekiah doesn't like that idea, and he rebels constantly. He's king for 11 years. Kind of surprising he's king for that long, because he's constantly rebelling against Babylon. And eventually, of course we know, Babylon comes in and destroys them all. Anyways, this is going to be somewhat of an odd video, because instead of reading anything in 2 Chronicles, we already read in 2 Chronicles how Zedekiah was made king. Now, I'm going to flip to Jeremiah, chapter 52, just briefly here, and read verses 1 through 3. Of course, the chapter heading here for chapter 52 says, Jerusalem besieged and taken by Chaldeans, many people and the vessels of the house of the Lord carried into Babylon. So, this is a historical chapter. Let us read the first 3 verses. It says here, Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For through the anger of the Lord it came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, till he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Now you'll note that this is almost word for word from the book of Kings. And you have to wonder, was Jeremiah written first and Kings used it as a source material? Or was Kings written first and Jeremiah used Kings as a source material for writing this? Or is it that there was a previous record and that both of them used that previous record as source material? It's an interesting thing. That I expect this kind of parallel narrative in Kings to Chronicles, but you don't quite expect it in a book of the prophets. Jeremiah, I do this here for one main reason, to show that Jeremiah was a historian. He was much like Mormon in this way, Mormon and Moroni, that Jeremiah recorded a lot of history. He didn't just record prophecies. I mean, Isaiah had, I think, 2 chapters where he talked about Hezekiah being on his deathbed and being granted another 15 years. So he had that brief historical note there, and I think he also included the story, well, he included some things about Hezekiah, the invasion of Assyria. He had 2 or 3 chapters there, maybe 4. But Jeremiah, I would say about a quarter to a third of his writing is actually historical writing. We've read about the trial of Jeremiah. We've read about how the king burned the roll of the scriptures. None of these accounts had prophecies in them. They are historical accounts. And this shows us another historical account, that Jeremiah is very much a prophet historian. Now, there is one last thing I want to talk about just a little bit in this video, because we've now reached Zedekiah. And this is just an interesting note on history. And we can see that people back then didn't delay their marriage. They didn't see marriage as something that needed to wait until you were mature enough or you were settled enough or whatever. And we can see this in Josiah here. Josiah and his 3 sons that we have listed. See, Josiah when Josiah dies at the age of 39. When he dies, his son Jehoahaz becomes king at the age of 23. Now that means Josiah was 16 years old when Jehoahaz was born. But Jehoahaz was only king for about 3 months before he is deposed by Egypt, and his brother Jehoiakim is installed as king, and Jehoiakim is 25, meaning he was born when Josiah was 14. Now remember, Josiah became king at the age of 8. He turned his heart to God at the age of 16. It was in his 8th year that he started really seeking out God. So he already has children when he starts seeking out God. Now we also read Jehoiakim, the son of Jehoiakim, very confusing there, but he's 18 when he becomes king for those 3 months. But Jehoiakim, being 25, he reigned for 11 years, so he dies at the age of 36, which means that he was only 18 when Jehoiakim was born. And Zedekiah is 21 years old when he becomes king, so he's only 3 years older than his nephew, than Jehoiakim, meaning he was about 10 years old when Josiah died. He was born when Josiah was 29. That's a nice range. And Jehoiakim, born when Josiah is 14, Zedekiah when Josiah is 29. That's a 15-year span there. But not only that, Zedekiah and Jehoahaz have the same mother, but Jehoiakim has a different mother. So Josiah had at least 2 wives, and one of his wives, Jehoahaz and Zedekiah, are the 2 sons born to the one wife, 13 years apart. We start seeing that in ancient Israel, the marrying age was not what we think of today. I mean, we think of today 18 minimum. Most people in modern day think if you get married before you're 25, then you're crazy. But 18 is kind of the age at which, the legal age at which you can get married without parental consent. Now, back then, to get married, you had to have permission from the bride's father. And that was just standard. No matter how old she was, you had to get her father's permission. But they were married a whole lot younger. You gotta think, if Josiah was 14 when his oldest son was born, he had to have been married at least a year. I mean, you could have gotten pregnant on your honeymoon, so 9 months at least. He was probably at the oldest 13 when he was married up, when he got his first wife. So people freak out about things like this in the modern day. But when you actually look at it, there are a whole lot of very righteous men, kings and prophets in the Old Testament, who got married very young. And Josiah is a great example of this. And if we look at the ages of all the kings of Judah, we're given how old they were when they became king and how old they were when they died, which means we could calculate how old their father was when they were born, most of the time. And when you do this, you start seeing some things that in the modern day will just trigger people, as they say. People hate the idea. But it was the way it was, and God approved of it. Josiah is considered the greatest king since David. A lot of people like Hezekiah better, but Josiah he is praised more than Hezekiah in the Bible. But he not only had multiple wives, but he was having children in his early teen years. I find it fascinating. But we leave that here and we return to some of our prophets next. So see you there.